Right now, as you're watching this video, there are over 40 million people getting trafficked against their will. And what makes it even worse is that stat is notoriously underreported.
So many victims even know their traffickers well, a parent, a family friend, even spouses. 7 out of 10 victims are female.
1 out of 4 is a child. We gotta do better. We need you to enter the fight, and we need you now.
This panel, recorded January 29, 2021, during the Human Trafficking Research Consortium, a 13th Annual Human Trafficking Awareness Day event, is titled Survivor Leaders, Being an Ally. This panel is moderated by Ms. Krista Lynn.
Here doing a panel with survivors and leaders of sex trafficking specifically. And we're going to talk really about things that involve just the survivor leader movement and what it takes to get here. And I really put these questions together, not having tons of opinions myself, but knowing that these are topics that survivor leaders across the United States and even globally are talking about regularly. And we need to get them out there and just start to have safe, hash it out kind of discussions so that we can hear all sides. And so I'm really grateful to see just survivors that I have so much respect for and get to pick their brains and hear from them. And I hope that we can all learn a lot from that. I'll do a quick name introduction, and then if you would please take a turn and just say a little bit about the work that you do. Sabrina Lopez is with One More Child. So I'm One More Child Executive Director of Anti-Trafficking, and she is one of just a phenomenal survivor mentor. She's been with us for quite a while and was at our safe home and just works tirelessly on behalf of those she stands beside. And Connie Rose, I've just had so much respect for. And like I told her, some of these questions are because I just wanted to pick your brain. And so where I get to talk to Kim and Sabrina more, I don't get to talk to you. So I was like, well, I want to know what she thinks about this. So I think you guys will want to know too. And we have Kim, and I'm going to say your last name, Squires.
Yes.
And Kim Squires is from More to Life, a partnering organization, and just love working with you. So we'll start with you, Kim. Tell us just 2 or 3 sentences about what you do.
Sure. So as she mentioned, I'm Kim Squires, and I'm a survivor mentor at More to Life, an Open Doors Outreach Network provider as well in the Suncoast region. So like she said, we partner together. So the Open Doors Outreach Network, we serve like 32 counties across the state of Florida, but obviously I don't cover all 32 counties. So we're able to partner together to be able to serve all the victims that are referred to us. So I work directly with the youth, on several different advocacy levels and emotional support mentoring.
Connie?
I was just waiting for you to comment.
Oh, awesome.
Hi, so I'm Connie Rose. I wear a few different. Hi, so I'm Connie Rose. I wear a few different hats. So one of the hats that I wear is I'm the president and founder of Victim to Survivors US. We're all about bridging and filling the gap. And our primary focus is really on survivors who have been out of the life 5 years or more, because that is the biggest gap that we have to fill right now. Services are not there for survivors, period. The robust services that we would like to have, but definitely for that age group. And so we run a lot of mentoring groups. We have a leadership academy, a speakers academy, a trainers academy. So that's what we do on the V2S, as well as an incredible Post-it note initiative that's called Get Help, Get Out. And then on top of that, I do a lot of consulting. I do legislation. As a matter of fact, yesterday, Kim Squires spoke about some new legislation that will be passing in regards to training in Florida. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
And my name is Sabrina Lopez. I am a survivor mentor with One More Child's mobile teams. Also work alongside with Kim as well. And we just provide mentorship and advocacy and therapy for clients and survivors all over Central Florida.
Thank you, guys. So we'll jump right into the first question. And I wanted to start with something somewhat basic just to make sure that we bring us all up to speed. I know there's attendees who will be tuning in who come all the way from like, I'm just learning about this, to many of you don't need this basic question, but bear with us. We want to get an understanding of survivor leadership. What is survivor leadership and why is it critical to direct services for exploited persons? And I'll start with Kim.
Sure. So survivor leadership it's like support, mentorship, it's advocacy skills, and it's very critical because we have the very unique relationship with building that trust and unique bond between, survivor to survivor. So
Absolutely. Connie, I'm going to have all three of you answer most and sometimes two of you answer.
Okay, cool. Okay. So about survivor leadership in my world and the world with survivors that I have the privilege of walking alongside has many different hats. And one of them is what Kim spoke to. It's about advocacy. It's about mentoring. It's also about having a seat at the table. And when I say a seat at the table, it's a real seat at the table. It's not after you did it. It's before you do it. It's also about having those skills. It's having those skills, not just about how do you go out and talk to another survivor, which is so important, but it's also having those skills, leadership skills. Think about what true leadership is, right? And how survivors can support and move forward and also support others and other organizations.
I'm just going to leave this on.
that's what I did.
So survivor leadership for me, I'm a survivor, and I have the opportunity to step into a role where I'm looked at as an equal to my peers, the other professionals that we get to work alongside that. And not as just, it's just a survivor, but as someone with that firsthand life experience that I'm able to speak up and say, hey, this is what's working and this is not what's working for survivors, and just like come up with ideas and just be that voice for the survivors that we work with to teach and educate our professionals that, some tactics or some models that we're working towards may not work for survivors. So we have the opportunity to tailor services that are going to benefit and empower survivors so that they can feel cared for and loved and feel protected. Also, it's also a humbling experience because I also get to learn from the professionals that we work with. But it's also empowering because the survivors that we do work with, they can see life outside of the life through me. They can see that there is hope for, in the future. Or they can see like, oh my gosh, I don't have to just continue to live in this world. I want to be something more. I want to be a voice. So it's an awesome role, and I'm super grateful to be a survivor leader in this community.
And Sabrina hits on something that is beautiful and impactful that as survivors, we innately know, because we often remember when we were, in our trauma and in the situations that we still had some really relevant, impactful, very intelligent thoughts, even at that time, even actually drug addicted or, in abusive relationships. And so when we're on this side, it is just a natural for many of us to know that day one, wherever you're sitting with that girl or boy or adult, we have something still to learn from them. And 18 years out, you have to still be hearing what do they think about this issue, literally right away. I'm going to do a follow-up question, and I'll go just to Connie. Connie, when and really to anyone else who wants to answer, but when we talk about direct services without the survivor leader getting to be right there as an equal, from a survivor perspective of your own or ones that you've worked with, what do you think people need to hear is kind of the downfall or the problem when direct services are provided that exclude us?
It's interesting that you asked me that question. And so first I have to say, it's so beautiful to be sitting between two survivors that are part of the Open Doors Network,
Yes.
because I helped write the Open Doors Network, that complete
Awesome.
part of Open Doors. So my heart is very full right now. So I just have to kind of put that out there. It's very interesting how this works. Okay, so what we have found through this, and I'm going to call it a movement. A lot of people don't agree with that word, but just for the moment, we're just going to go with the movement, the anti-sex trafficking movement. It really started with a few very strong survivors in other parts of the country. Florida is very new to this compared to a lot of other states until we passed the Safe Harbor Act in 2012. And so the folks that were coming to the table were folks that learned about it somewhere else, read it in a book, those kinds of things. Never want to take away from that. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it took a lot. It took a lot of us, a lot of strong survivors to come to our allies and say, you're doing this work. Thank you for opening the door. But to have that true connection, to really connect with the survivor, with the victim, with the survivor, that first point of contact when it is another survivor, because none of our stories are exactly the same. When it is another survivor, though, there's an instant rapport that happens. There's an instant bravery. It's not about safety. There's an instant bravery that happens. And it's so important because, in a sense, you speak the same language. And what I mean by that is that that of one survivor to another can read the body language, can read the eyes, the facial expressions. So it's more than what did you learn in a book, what did you learn at a training, but it's also kind of that inner, that inner sense. It's that instinct that we have to rely on. So it's extremely important.
Thank you. Either one of you want to expound on that?
She nailed it.
She really did.
Okay.
She hit it
I
on
mean,
the head.
I could give a very quick scenario
Yes,
of just
absolutely.
even a situation I was in last night. So I responded to a crisis call, which we do many times. And so while I'm meeting with her and the mother triggered the young lady pretty badly. And the mother wasn't able to identify that she was triggered, and she was shutting down, and she was starting to just go really hot and have anxiety attacks. Can't breathe with this thing. And thank you. And so, so she was starting to have an anxiety attack, and she started to faint and whatnot. And so long story short, I was able to recognize that, pick up on her body language and say, okay, hold on. I've got to sit her down. I've got to ground her. I've got to support her. I got to pop this rubber band on her and bring her back. So again, it's picking up on the body language. It's understanding like what she's going through and making sure that she knows in that moment to bring her back so that she can feel safe and secure where she is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Next question is, what is an ally to survivors of trafficking? And like Connie hit on with the word movement, some people don't like ally for the word. We're going to use it here today because it's a common word, and just bear with the words. If you have followed different words and movements, words are meaningful and important, but we also at times have to choose one and go with it. So allies. What is an ally of survivors of trafficking, and what do you wish they knew or considered when working as direct service providers? We'll start with Sabrina.
Allies are, our community partners. That's just the people that we work alongside trying to, combat the fight against trafficking. I wish personally that they just considered that. And I'm not saying all of them, but just consider like we are real people. We just have a lot of trauma that we need to work through. And just to take the time, meet us where we're at, talk to us, get to know us on a personal level where you can truly understand where we're coming from. And that's so helpful, because if you're building that rapport, we want to make sure that we're also safe and that we can trust you, and we need to be able to see and feel that. I hope I answered. I can't remember the second part of that.
Yeah. Right, so I'm going to take the mask off. And then I'm like, wait, there's probably lipstick that you guys don't want to see. It doesn't matter how much I do. Anyway, it's the reality of life. And so allies come in all shapes and forms and sizes, from our law enforcement to our legislators to other organizations to, different service providers. And so again, it's real coming back to, and I think all of us collectively that are survivors here today can speak to this. It's about have us at the seat of the table with you. Mm-hmm. Every step of the way, from the time that you start planning what you're going to do, your organization, to what your trainings are going to be, to what your outreach is going to be, to how do you want to participate in legislation or help with legislation, whatever it might be, please always make sure, because that is a true ally. A true ally. I've been doing this work since 2008. Okay, so a true ally is someone that really understands and, more importantly, respects a survivor's voice, and also understanding, just Sabrina, right? Mm-hmm. Just as Sabrina said, we have trauma, and it doesn't matter how long we've been out of the life. There are still things that will trigger us in one way or another, just like it will you. You hear our stories and what happens to some of you, right? You have flashbacks about things, you're crying, you've got this pit in your stomach. So then when you are working with survivors, I don't ever want to hear this again. I'm going to be really open and frank about this since we're talking about allies. I don't ever want to hear from another ally again that, oh my goodness, look what happened. They cried. I'm not talking about being hysterical, but that tears came down their face, or that they got a little bit of upset about a conversation that was happening. That's why we don't want to have survivors. Because I want you to think about the next time something happens to you.
Absolutely. And I would add to that anger too. If you were in the first thing, my word, some of us survivors, it's a common reaction to grow up, and it's anger that protects us from so much in life. Later, it's leadership skills, it's intensity, but we still can be difficult. I have someone close to me who says when he's trying to learn from me and agreeing with me, it feels like I'm arguing with him. And I'm like, that's because I'm intense and you're not getting it fast enough. And so I'm like, I just need you to get it. And that's how we feel about the whole world. Like, we walk out and nobody's getting it fast enough. And we have, over 100 active cases, has Open Doors outreach providers in 9 counties. Nobody's getting it fast enough. And we live with this intense anger and frustration. Mm-hmm. And even when you're agreeing with us, we can appear as aggressive, is what I get told when someone's not being nice.
I think that it comes back to the whole power and control.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so understand that also, that our power and our control was taken away from us. Mm-hmm. And so when an ally says, I'll be your voice for you, you just took again our power and control away. Yeah. I'll be at the seat of the table for you. You just did that again. So just really understand, that whole power and control dynamics. And if you don't know it, then reach out and we'll be happy to walk alongside of you and walk you through it. Okay? Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's also important to know you can't fix something you don't know. So if you don't know what it is to live the life, how are you going to fix that? In order for you to fix that, you need to have a survivor on your side. You need to have a survivor at that table so that they can tell you, basically giving you the ins and outs, the rundown of what that is, what that life is all about, in order for you guys to really get together and start, making some moves in the community. I see that definitely happening, but I would like to see that, just become much, much bigger in this work, just because I feel sometimes that, we're just like, oh yeah, they get too emotional, or something's stirring up and we just don't want to deal with that. But that's raw and that's real. And that's something that you need to learn, because if you're going to work with survivors, that's going to happen. Just because it's me and I'm in a leadership position, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen with the people you're working with. Expect that. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to bring that survivor back present and make her feel like she's safe,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kim, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I mean, so I can only agree with my beautiful colleagues over here that obviously allies are anybody in the community that's willing to help and fight back for the right causes of, trying to support us in the human trafficking fight. But then I also would add to it that it's very imperative that you understand each individual survivor, that they have trauma and that they have unique needs. And it's very, very imperative that anybody that's working with a survivor is trauma informed so that they know how to be victim centered and allow the survivor to lead. And again, having a survivor at the table to be able to give their directive and their knowledge of expertise of the life that they lived. So
Excellent, thank you. And by trauma informed, you can learn a lot online about that. I think, for a very takeaway from here, it's understanding what trauma does to us developmentally, understanding our trauma responses so that when we cry more easily or seem angry more easily or are aggressive, that you understand our trauma responses and you're able to not push us away or, in some ways relationally punish us for that, but instead stand beside that. And before moving on to the next question, I do just want to end that ally question with, I only knew allies at first, and I just was very fortunate and met some who just knew to listen to me and hear me, and they also knew to speak up to me. And so I just love the partnership. I feel like I have just as much to learn from them as they do from me. We often come from different cultures, and there were things that I needed to understand about the culture that I was moving into and wanted to raise a daughter in. And I couldn't have done it without allies. So don't be shy, be brave. And what we're saying up here is stand beside us as equals, listen, and listen first. But also don't be afraid to tell us what you actually think. The allies who have hashed it out with me, and the ones who have even just taught me things that I didn't know. I'm so grateful and feel like we need both of us. We don't, if I had come out of everything and thought everyone survived trauma, because that was who helped me, that was a very depressing thought to me coming from generational trauma. I needed to see people who, it was the first time I'd ever heard that not every girl is raped. Like, I just really thought, some don't talk about it, but everyone's been raped at least once. Come on. And you have this flippant attitude. And I needed allies to build hope and show me my daughter could be raised in a world where it may happen, but we can try to let it not. And so allies are important, and we ask you just to keep getting involved and don't be shy with us, even when we're intense or sad. How do you see survivor leaders and allies working together, and what problems have you seen that need to be addressed by one or both sides? Connie?
I feel like I already addressed this.
A little you did.
I know. I
little
think
you
that I
did in
already
the
did.
verse.
But I really want to expand on that, because you hit a point and I was like, yes. Here's the other part of it, is that we don't all know that we were victims.
Absolutely.
It took me almost 40 years before I realized that's what it was.
Yeah.
And as Krista spoke to, I thought it was normal. What was happening to me, because that's what I grew up with since I was 2 years old. So for me, it was a normalcy of life. And then as you start learning about things, like when I started learning about human trafficking and not really understanding why I came in contact with the Clearwater Tampa Bay Task Force, which was in 2008, why did they want me to be on boards, and why did they want me to do all these things when I didn't even know what human trafficking was until the light bulb went off one day. So it is really important also to understand that we can ask to have a seat at the table. We can want to walk alongside of you, collaborate with you, be part of the team, but we don't always recognize that in fact we were a victim. And what does that mean? And the other thing is that when you are looking at putting together like a survivor advisory board, which is something that I would always encourage every organization to do your best It's not always easy, I know, because I put together mentorship programs for survivors. Do your best, though, to have as many representing at that table. In other words, that you have women, that you have women of color, that you have, Anglo-Saxons, that you have transgender, that you have labor trafficking, that you have international. Do your best to have as many people that came from different backgrounds and different types of trafficking, so that you don't just have this narrow view, because here's what we have what we experienced. So do your best with that.
Good answer. Anyone want to add? We did talk a good amount about this question.
She did. She hit a lot of good points. That was mine, is just bringing all of our strengths and skills to the table to support the survivor. And then the next thing that I had was just that the thing that that really can be a problem is when one group thinks that they're better than the other, and they're not like really understanding the other side's perspective. So like not being open to each one's perspective.
Absolutely.
Like that's imperative, because everybody sees things differently, and there's blind spots or different opinions.
And seeing how we both need each other. I think that's the part that gets left behind, is that survivors who so need both allies and those who've had similar experiences, they don't benefit from that when we don't work as equals.
Yes.
And then we as leaders don't grow. We learn a lot from our allies, just like we do from survivors just coming out, and even victims who aren't coming out yet. There's so much to be learned from all sides. As survivors, we're experts with our own stories. What training, volunteer, work experience do you believe is beneficial before moving from survivor to survivor leader, if any? And be specific if you feel like training is necessary. Just share something about, whether trauma-informed or whatever. Who would like to answer first?
I'll answer.
Okay.
I think for me, just as Connie mentioned, it took me about going on nine years, where I came to terms with the fact that I was, a survivor of trafficking. I became a mom at the age of 15 from my exploiter. So that wasn't even on my mindset. It was more like, okay, I'm pregnant, I'm a mom, and now I just need to focus on raising my daughter, because that, abortion wasn't an option for me, and she gave me my life, so I owed her hers. It took a long time to get to the fact where I'm just like, okay, this happened. But as I was getting to that point, I realized that I can't do this by myself. So whether that was counseling in whatever form that is, art therapy, if it's, exercising, whatever it is, EMDR, whatever that case may be, counseling or, journaling, or for me, what hit home was finding my identity in Christ. I needed to know that I had purpose and I had worth. And as I'm reading the Bible and I see, okay, God says that I'm worth more than rubies and I have plan and purpose. I needed to hear that and have that deeply enrooted inside myself in order to move past that pain and get to a point where I'm just like, okay, now I can accept what had happened. I can really understand that, I was a victim of, child sex trafficking. So for me, it was just getting down to the root of that soul searching and really healing from that in order to move from survivor to survivor leader, because you can't be, I don't want to say, you have to be whole in your healing in order to make sure that you're pouring into somebody else. So I needed to make sure I was getting poured into before I started to step out and deal with the livelihood of other survivors.
So here I am, the controversial one.
Yes. Thank you.
So there's a lot of conversation of when is it appropriate, or when is it time for a survivor to be able to come out and speak, share her story, sit on a panel, become a survivor leader, become an advocate, become a mentor. So there's a lot of conversation of there's a timeline, and there is a timeline, quite honestly. We pretty much focus on 3 to 5 years. And there's a reason for that, because now that once you've come to that realization, that is what that is. And nobody wants a label. Nobody wants a label, right? But I will tell you that for the hundreds of survivors, actually thousands that I've worked with over the years, when they finally that's what it is, you can really see this relief start to happen. That's part of where some of the real healing starts. So about 3 to 5 years, and here's why. Because as you're going through your therapies, your different kind of trauma-informed care, whatever it might be, finding if it's finding Christ or a different religion, whatever it is for you, because it's different for all of us. As you're going through AA and NA, because there's all kinds of addictions. I don't want to just get stuck on that one. It's really important for us to walk it. So my survivors that come to me and say, I want to be a trainer and do media and do all these other things, it's like you have to live life and walk life first. And here's the reason why, because as you're doing it, because we all slip and you kind of go over here just a little bit, I'm here to be your support system and to help you come back here. And look what you just did. And here's the other thing about that, because then we as survivors are able to start identifying where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and more importantly, what does success really look like?
Yeah, absolutely.
They really did cover it. So that was what I was pretty much going to say. It's the same thing as Sabrina and Miss Connie over here. Is it really comes from focusing on yourself, healing from your own trauma first. You can't go out and help somebody else if you're not healed from your own trauma. Okay, it's webinars, it's training, it's having a mentorship from a survivor leader. You need to know what that looks like and have somebody walk alongside you and hold your hand and show you what it looks like before you can go out and be that survivor leader to others.
Excellent.
They really hit it home.
They did.
Good job,
All of
ladies.
you are amazing answers. I'm going to switch gears for just a minute to a survivor about a question about male survivors, because we want to make sure they're included. There's statistics out, but most of us, I think, agree that they're not accurate yet, that males have not come for help. They haven't been counted in the calls because there's just so much stigma still, and many reasons that they're not getting help the way that females are. And so we need to just do well at including them into the conversation that, our Home at One More Child is for females only. But as providers of Open Doors Outreach Network, One More Child, More to Life, we both serve males and females. And, we absolutely see a number of males, and we also recognize from hearing those male stories that there's many, many more who aren't getting help. And that's the scary part, and why the conversation needs to include them. How do we help male survivors? Is it different than how we help female survivors?
For me, I don't think it's different. I mean, we share the same life experience, so I'm going to look at you the same way I would a female. I think it's harder for them to step up and speak out about it because, like you said, the stigma is there, but it's making them feel like help them remove that shame. Like, no, yes, this happened to you. Let's work that out. Let's walk alongside you. Let's make sure that you get to heal from that too, because you shouldn't have to keep that inside because of what society believes or how you should feel. Like, oh, it shouldn't happen to a male. Absolutely it does, but you're no different than I am. So I want to make sure that I see you too, and that you know that you're seen and you know that you are heard. So I don't think, for me, working with the males is different. I look at them the same way I would a female survivor.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sabrina. We also, like mentioned, we partner with a organization locally that has all males in their home. So the population that we see that's affected, and it's sad because they don't even notice it a lot of the times, is the LGBTQ community. Okay, we have young boys that are runaways because they're not accepted for who they are, right? Yeah. And a lot of them are getting caught up on the gaming system and things like that. So once again, it comes back to what Sabrina mentioned already. It's like, they're no different from us. Their story is the same, and they just need to know that, that they're accepted for who they are, but then come alongside them and help them heal from their trauma.
Right.
Okay.
I'm letting them just run that part.
Absolutely.
It was great.
So and on the survivor side, there is often in the helping field in general, this idea like, oh, females need to get help from females and males need to get help from males. I think that's been dispelled because what we're really trying to teach people is we want choice. And we want choice not in one area. We want choice after choice after choice, the same way non-survivors of trafficking and childhood trauma have choice. And so we need males in this field. We need male allies in this field. We need male survivors of trafficking as mentors. And just, don't be, I see them all nodding, so I won't even pass this as a question, but just be cautious when working in this work, not to think that, oh, the male needs a male. Many a times for, there's many of trafficking survivors we've worked with that the mother is the trafficker. Go to a female counselor, has a female after your mom is, one who helped traumatize you, and that's challenging. And same with, the father or males just have sometimes issues with males. And so give the choice is when possible. Sometimes it's not. Next question. Can you guys, and I'll say right off the bat, you did mention a resource that many of us partner with, the United Institute for Boys. You can go on One More Child's website, and Micah, who is the CFO, was on a panel just the other night. She's brilliant, she's passionate, and they do have the first boys home in Florida or in the nation?
It's in the nation.
In the nation.
Yeah.
And they're doing amazing work. So that is one resource right there, the United Institute for Boys. Can we point to some other resources beside what's here that the Open Doors Outreach Network, whether More to Life, One More Child works with females and males ages 10 to 24. Do we have any other resources that we would want to mention? And United Abolitionists, of course, works with males and females. Most organizations that aren't residential do. Is that correct today?
No.
Okay. Most of our partnering organizations do.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Okay.
And I say when we don't, we get the referral in and then we just refer it right back out.
Okay, so name a few that you refer to.
But Nathan Earl with Arc of Freedom
absolutely.
in South Florida is phenomenal. So he works with males, he works with LGBTQ, he has his outlook is phenomenal, and he is a survivor, and I can share that with you. I'm not sharing his story, but I can share that with you. So he comes from a incredible background and relatability, and he is a wealth of information. So he is the one that when I need a referral for a male or transgender, I go to Nathan and say, this is what's going on. This is not my wheelhouse. Please help me. Where do I go and how to direct it? So it's Nathan Earl with Arc of Freedom.
Great. I think that alone is enough.
Yeah.
Okay. He's you learn a lot from just even watching him or getting to sit with him. As survivors of trauma, do you believe we're at greater risk of compassion fatigue? And one of you, whoever goes first, explain what compassion fatigue is. And if so, what can the allies who work with survivor leaders do to help us as survivor leaders? Like Connie said earlier, like we don't have the 3 to 5 years come into this work, even get lots of training, and all of a sudden all of our trauma is gone. We will still have layers to peel off through the life. And honestly, some of the things that come from trauma, I decided as a full-grown adult, I like that. I like it better than the other part of the world, and that I'm keeping. And yet it's going to be different. It's going to make us different. And so when thinking about what allies can do, specifically as survivor leaders, do you think we suffer with compassion fatigue easier? And if so, what would you want them to do?
I don't know if it's so much that it's easier, it's that we identify. So what we have to constantly do, as you have to do as human beings, is this is another human being sitting in front of me. This is their story. And yes, is it going to hit your heart? Is it going to trigger something in you? Yes, because you're empathetic and you're compassionate and you're human. And so as survivors, though, we have to be extremely, extremely mindful. So I am really all about having mentors and if a survivor works for an organization, to make sure that there is someone for them to always be able to be in contact with that's very non-threatening. You don't have to worry about your job or your position. That if in fact you are working with another survivor and something does trigger you, that you have this other person that you can go to, tell them what's going on, walk through some really great trauma-informed care, victim-centered practices, and reground. But one of the other things I'm going to just say to all of you is there's something that's called the box breathing method. And so it's all about learning how to breathe, right? And it's taking 4 deep breaths in, hold it at the count of 4, exhale at the count of 4, do it 4 times. I have whoever I'm working with, if I find myself in a place, I'm like, let's do this really cool thing. And it's called the 4 box breathing method. They're like, what? And I have them do it, and it grounds us, right? Or find some technique like putting your fingers together and just breathe in. Here's a really great trick that I train survivors to do is and do this with me. Take the tip of your tongue and put it on the roof of your mouth. Take a breath. Let it out. Now, do you feel a shift? Okay, most of the time what will happen is it's that sensation of the tip of your tongue being on the roof of your mouth. It makes a shift in the chemicals in your brain. There's just a little bit of breath, right? Brings extra oxygen. But you can do that with no one else. You could be 1,000 people in the room and do that technique and nobody know what you just did. And I know you have a beautiful answer for this question.
So for my answer, when I sat down and looked at this question, I'm going to be honest what I put. So from a survivor, I put compassion fatigue. It is common amongst us. If you don't practice self-care, if you don't have the therapy outlet or somebody safe that you can talk to and just kind of release, then yes, you will burn out. It has to be a healthy balance between, again, self-care and learning to not put yourself in a place where you can take on secondary trauma from their trauma. So to me, that's very important that you know that. And again, keeping yourself separate from their trauma and having that place to release. So it can be possible if it's not done the right way.
And I'm going to add to that as a clinician and a survivor. I think that's true across the board. I do think we suffer at greater capacity, not always, but often, because childhood trauma affects development and can make our window of tolerance for stress decreased. And so we have to be extra cautious. But as a clinician, I want to see that become standard of anyone working with us, that we have mentors, or clinically it would be like supervisors, that's a safe place, non-threatening, your job's not going to be hindered, and that someone is checking in with us on our emotional, mental well-being. So that's allies too. If you're in the work, follow along with that. Sabrina, do you feel we're at greater risk for compassion fatigue? And if so, what do you wish that allies who work directly beside you would do or know?
Yeah, I do. Just because it is, a lot of our trauma can come up, we can relate to a lot of the clients that we work with. So we do get that secondary, secondary trauma. I've witnessed that myself, where we've had, someone that needed to just take a break. But the fact that an ally was able just to continue to check up on her and was able to say, hey, I see you. I know you're an awesome, awesome survivor leader. Let me help you. Let me walk alongside you. Let me continue to check up on you. That's important. That shows that, we're worth it. That shows that we are seeing that the work that we're doing is great work. And we're not, we are important in this work. So we're not just being tossed to the side and saying, oh, okay, well, she can't handle it anymore and it's burnout. But that our allies are coming together and saying, oh, wait a minute. I see that, what's going on. Let's talk about it. Let's come up with a plan so that, you can get your mind right a little bit and then come back to work stronger than ever. So it is very, very important.
And it's a beautiful way of remembering that while we become leaders, we are still also survivors. And Connie mentioned the work that she's doing in that 3 to 5 years out. And, some of the work that I needed certain allies and survivors, organizations to stand beside me was 10 plus years out. It was handling the stress of leadership when I didn't have the traditional path to get here. And I love that Connie's doing that, because I think how sad if services help us get to one point and then we break when we're in leadership because we didn't learn how to be organized to that capacity, or we, can't keep up with the amount of meetings people in the regular world have. My goodness, it's a lot of meetings. And so we need that long-term support too, to not burn out later too.
Yeah. And I want to just, if I can just speak to that,
Absolutely.
and thank you for bringing that up, Krista, and because we will reach out. So just because like Krista is the executive director, there's other survivors that are in high leadership roles. We're in those roles, but we too are human beings. And so if we reach out to you, like Jan's a great resource for me. I reach out to her and she's like, well, what about this? Do you think about that? And I know that she's safe for me to reach out to from paving the way. And I know that she is safe for me to reach out to, that there is no judgment, because it's the same for each and every one of you. You have a mentor, you have a coach, you have someone that you can reach out to in a non-judgmental way, and they won't look at you like, see, you should not have had that job. And so just please be mindful about that.
Absolutely. Remember, we're spending a lot of time, often not always, telling ourselves, you shouldn't have that job. And so you can be encouragements. Okay, thank you. Kim, do you have something to add to that? And then we have time for one, maybe two more questions.
Okay. So, I mean, it was pretty much covered, but I just want to say that if you're working with survivors too, check in on your leaders. Like, have those, weekly check-ins at least. Hey, how are you doing? Like, where are you at? Mentally be there for them and check in with them and just make sure that, everything is good. Don't just assume like, hey, they're good. And, then the next thing you know, they're burned out and they're compassion fatigued. So I would just add that to it as well.
Yeah. And last question, Connie kind of touched on this earlier, but maybe not in whole. Historically, the trafficking movement was rife with re-exploitation, as organization leaders hired or brought in survivors as volunteers. And even when we were paid, it was done in this way of, my own instance, being told by a leader that I'm a trafficking survivor when I had come after, going through years to be a clinician and come to be a clinician. I am a trafficking survivor. I didn't need to be told in that way. It should have been for me to figure out slowly in my own way. And if you hire me as a clinician, then not only do you not get to, and that would be as a survivor mentor, as a, front desk assistant somewhere, you don't then get to put on us that we're survivors of trafficking before we're ready and have us share our stories to help raise money. So the question specifically is, do you still see this as a current problem? And what do we want people to know? And how can we continue to minimize re-exploitation?
That's my soapbox. It is continuing to happen. We're making strides. We are making strides. But several of us through January have been asked to participate in all kinds of panels and to, go to different events and to speak and all of that, and fundraisers. And then who ends up walking away with money in their pocket? It is not the survivor. And so what I'm going to say to that is build it into your budget. If you're doing a major fundraiser, get a sponsor so that you can pay that survivor to come and share their journey. And not just the survivor, but they have a mentor, so that mentor can be there with them also. The other part of that is why when Voices for Children, which I now sit on their board, came to me and said, we have this concept that we would like to present, which is open doors. And would you like to be a part of it? And I said, does that mean that I get to do the part about survivors and having jobs? And they're like, yeah, that's your role. And I was like, yes. And so I'm going to just share this with you, because you see, that was the start. That Open Doors really started to set the stage in the state of Florida, not only for a very comprehensive provider network, but also about survivors coming to the table for their expertise and to be paid for their lived experience. And so please, and if for some reason you can't, then find some other way to compensate. You know, maybe you can do it with gift cards. You know, maybe you can a massage. Maybe they're going to school. Maybe you can offer to maybe buy their books. You know, find some way and ask. I can't really do this. What can I do for you? And here's the thing, because when at least you ask us and we know that you care enough and that more importantly, you value who we are as a human being and what we have lived through, that says a lot about who you are and who your organization is.
Absolutely. And there is the other norm that I love in the field is when it's like a trade. And so there's multiple organizations where the leaders, they know they will do stuff for one more child and we do stuff for them. And that's a beautiful relationship, but it's not one where they're expecting it to be free. They expect that they're going to bend over backwards in their schedules when we ask, and we're going to do that for them. And so just looking at it like you would in any other business, that you would treat people like competent and worthy, and you would not expect things for free in that way, especially that's like us pouring out our stories and hearts. That's, you know, no matter how many years, it takes a toll. Anyone else for one? Do we have time for one more answer to that? Okay, one more answer.
I'll make it brief.
Go,
because
Kim.
I have to put the question back on the audience.
Okay, do it.
Okay. So yes, as they said, we're more than our stories, right? And at the end of the day, our expertise and our lived knowledge is so valuable. So I want to ask you a question. In your field of your job, right? You have expertise in that field, correct? Do you want to be paid for your job? Do you want to be paid for your position? Think of us that way. We're more than our stories. We deserve to be paid for our expertise and our knowledge and our lived experience that we can bring to the table and give back to you all. So always, you know, I like to always put it back that way is, you want to be paid for your job.
And I love the intensity I see in Kim. Just understand.
I get a little passionate.
I want to be like
That's real. That is, it's real. That, you
it
know, to think that because we've been through stuff, we now should have to share it over and over again for free, or to be shamed that we don't care is very difficult when non-survivors would not be expected to work in this for free. And at times they even suffer less compassion fatigue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all for being here. And Calvary Church of Ormond Beach has put together, speaking of compensation, is not much, right? But we've each got a little basket for you, a bag for you. So go ahead and pick one.